Hmm.
I think about the future a lot. Dreaming is a technology. It's available to all of us. And so I think it's really important to come
Love that.
together, specifically to come together to dream about our futures, which are so deeply rooted in the places where we live.
Watch some tech bro make this a phrase. Today's guest is interesting for a lot of reasons. She does many, many things. She's a COO at a care tech platform. She's also the co founder of RebuildTO, which is how I met Negin for the first time. And she writes a newsletter called Metaformative for visionaries and revolutionaries. Negin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I think you're a very interesting person for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons being that your style of writing stands out. I really admire your clarity of expression because I've been reading your newsletter for the last, I want to say, 4 months now. And it is long form content, which I have, as I get older, I'm beginning to enjoy more and more of. Just moving away from the doom scrolling aspect of it. And the other piece that I find very interesting is you're also a futurist. Now, I've never met someone who calls themselves that. So, what does that mean? Tell us more.
Great question. It's like an identity I've been aspiring to and then trying on now a little bit more.
Hmm.
I think about the future a lot, and I think from my understanding of kind of traditional futurism, which is, compared to a lot of other labels or positions, open to interpretation in a
Hmm.
variety of ways. But I think for me, futurism or being a futurist means you think about the future while also thinking about the past, because a lot of where we're headed is, you can look to the past to see what cycles are coming or what trends might be happening. It's not predictions. It's not based on feelings or philosophies. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be a futurist philosopher or a futurist designer or a futurist writer. But I think being a futurist is really a combination of looking at like historical data, current data, and then synthesizing that data and stories within our culture and our society and cross culturally as well to make speculations about where we might be heading.
Very cool. Very cool. And for, yeah, this is a bit of a simplification, but what do you think is going to change, but not really in the next 10 years? Given there's this whole, well, it wouldn't be a podcast if we didn't talk about AI. So,
What do I think is going to change, but not really?
mhm.
My gosh.
I only ask the hard hitting questions on
I know
this.
you just came at me like right from the get-go, like a 1-2 punch. Okay, what do I think is going to change, but not really? I think that, a lot of industries will change.
Mhm.
But I think our relationship to ourselves, our desire to understand the existential nature of reality and our existence, I think we will have different ways of exploring that, but I don't think we're going to necessarily like answer any of those questions. So while there will be a lot of
Mm.
tangible, change in a lot of different industries, I think the human condition it will continue to be a mystery to some extent. For some, spirituality provides them with some answers. For others, it's science or technology or a combination of things. But
Mhm.
I think that our curiosity and our desire to want to keep expanding into our potential, I don't think that's going to change.
I love that. I love that. The meaning of life will always be an existential question. Yeah, I like it. Very cool. I want to dive more into the Rebuild TO project that you've been working on. How did that come to be, and why was that important to you in the first place?
Yeah, it was just over a year ago now that I love New York. New York is one of my favorite cities in the world, and I'm not alone in that as I see
Yeah,
you nodding your head.
New York's great.
New York's amazing, and I fell in love with it when I went the first time. I think I was 19, And every time I've gone back since, my love hasn't decreased or changed in any way. In fact, I would say it's grown. My admiration and appreciation for the city, for the culture, for the way that people show up in that space. And while I was always a lover of New York, I remember coming back to Toronto after every trip and being like, but Toronto's home. Toronto's home. I love Toronto. I was a Toronto rep. I like did a lot of, cultural programming and city building and community building pre-COVID. And so it was never a question to me of whether I was going to live here or not until COVID happened.
Hmm.
And as some folks know, for those who might be listening to this who live in Toronto or maybe beyond, there were different lockdown protocols all across the world, and Toronto unfortunately had one of the worst protocols and lockdowns and longest lockdowns in the world in terms of cities. And that really did something to us that I think even prior to that, maybe we didn't really have the strongest sense of shared identity in the city. That was
Hmm.
always something I think that was mentioned, that Toronto doesn't really know who it is. And when I felt myself falling out of love, it was such a painful experience because a city is not just somewhere you live, it's your home. And so falling out of love with your home for someone like me who's already left home several times in different
Hmm.
capacities, I'm a two-time refugee. I've lived in different places. I don't have the concept of home that some people do in terms of going back to family because my family's separated. So it was such a grief-filled experience to be like, and now I'm not in love with the city, and now I'm considering leaving the city. But where do I go? And so I went down this whole like existential, speaking of existential, I went down the existential path of asking myself all of these questions about what it means to live somewhere and what it means to invest in that place and in the future, and why do we choose one place over another to live.
Hmm.
And for me, it became very clear that I live here because of family and community, and that it would be extremely hard for me to leave for many reasons. One being that I am like a caregiver for my family, especially in an emotional way. And so not being close to them is not really an option for me for an extended period of time. And so I was like, okay, well, I can't accept the status quo and I can't really leave. So my only option is to create change. I was having several conversations with different folks at that time who had very similar sentiments. And I don't know, it was very strange. One morning I just woke up from a dream and it was like, RebuildTO, go post on Instagram right now and register the domain. And I was like,
I love
okay.
that.
And so it happened, and a collective of us came together very soon after that to start dreaming and scheming about what this thing could become.
I love that. Yeah, I actually saw your first Instagram post because Anita shared it on her Instagram. Shout out Anita, how you doing? And I was like, yeah, this sounds very interesting. I do agree. Like, I feel I moved to Toronto in 2018, and the city was very different before April 2020, and something changed drastically. And again, maybe this is just me at this point, sort of connecting the dots. But I feel like with the Toronto Raptors winning the NBA title for the first time, I felt like that was the first time where Canada as a whole started looking at themselves a little bit more differently. Toronto started to believe that, okay, we're not just a team that will keep get your hopes up and then destroy us. And then COVID hit, and then everything sort of went downhill since then. What's the vision for RebuildTO?
Mm, great question. In our first year, we were deep in research, trying to understand, are the sentiments we're feeling sentiments that are across the board? And what can we do to respond? What are our limitations? What is our capacity as a team? And where can we make the most impact? So we did the curated gatherings, which you came to one. We had community conversations, one-on-one conversations, and we kept hearing some things over and over and over again. And I can say confidently that after a year of research and storytelling, that we are ready to embark on our next adventure in 2025. I'll plant a little seed that it's going to be
Okay.
it's going to be more so focused on animating and activating neighborhoods through an ambassador program. And we hope to really bring some of those experiences that we were able to curate as a team to our communities and networks to each neighborhood across the city, because we found that it was profoundly impactful to just come together and talk about some of the challenges. We realized that even just in the conversation and in that shared space, transformation is possible, because what it does is that it catalyzes different types of thinking. It inspires action. It makes you walk around your city and look at the city differently, because you just finished having a conversation about it. And there's always something to learn from somebody that lives maybe in a different neighborhood or even in your neighborhood, but they're seeing things from a different perspective or experiencing things from a different perspective than you. So yeah, it's, originally our vision was to harness the diverse voices of the city to co-author a new story for our future. And that's still in many ways true. And I think ultimately what we're moving towards is almost a decentralized movement that can empower, enable, provide some sort of sandbox for folks who
Mhm.
want to get engaged, who want to give back and contribute to their city and neighborhood and their community, to have some sort of like cohesive way to do that, like being a part of something that's just bigger than maybe one person's idea or a small group's idea. Like, how can we come together and work towards a shared vision and a shared future? Because I think the city has a lot of potential. I think every city has a lot of potential, but as someone who's lived here for
Especially Toronto.
29 years, there's a lot of untapped potential here.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Could you give us an example of what an activation could look like?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even if we look back to our curated gatherings, which you were a part of,
Yes. Actually, could you tell people more about the curated gatherings? I had a great time. I thought they were really cool. Made a
yeah,
few new friends out of it.
yeah, our product team came together and we imagined just an experience where folks feel that sense of connection and belonging and have the space to not just talk about how the traffic is right now in the
Mhm.
city, but also about what are some of your favorite memories and neighborhoods. What does home mean to you? Where do you feel most connected to other people? Like in what moments? And that vulnerable conversation in relation to a physical space that we call our home, it just catalyzed so much inspiration. And people reached out to us afterwards just saying that it was really powerful to be in circle with folks talking about things that we don't often get a chance to talk about. We might be thinking them, we might be having some one-on-one conversations, but there was something really beautiful about the group coming together, a bit of a gamified framework to enable people to choose questions based on their level of comfort. And it just, I think that the impact was that folks left feeling a little bit more aware of where they live, what the challenges are, and what the possibilities are.
And as I hope you continue to do more of them because I feel like people will benefit from just attending events like those. I feel like we need more offline things to do, for lack of a better word. And as much as AI starts taking over stuff, are you finding people in your circle starting to get more exhausted of their screens? Because in mine, like, people are now actively trying to ditch their phones, trying to ditch their screens as much as possible.
Absolutely. I think it's not our natural way of being. And I think that beyond exhaustion, it really psychologically impacts us in ways that I don't think we've truly understood yet.
Hmm.
We need human to human connection. We need eye contact. We need to feel into each other's energies in a room. We can't do that yet on a screen. I'm not saying the technology isn't going to evolve. And, I believe in technology. I'm a huge fan of technological progress. And I also believe that we need to counter that with that deep natural state that we require as human beings. We're not cyborgs yet, close enough, but not yet. Um,
Maybe another 20 years.
yeah, exactly. We need to be in nature. We need to share space together. And I also just think there's something really isolating about remote work, which I'm
Mhm.
sure, I'm not the only one that feels this way, but there's something about the synergy that happens when you're sitting around a table together, when you're taking real tangible sticky notes and putting them on a
Yeah.
wall. And I think you come up with better ideas, and you end up having better synthesis when you share space and you can build on each other's ideas. I feel like the way people act on virtual platforms is a kind of a similar to the way people act in their cars when they're driving on the street. Like, I don't know, I kind of have a little bit of road rage. I'm just gonna come clean. And like the way that I
So
feel,
you're the one that nearly ran me down the
yes,
highway. Got it.
yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, like I just feel like we have different permissions and conditions in our car, but like the way I might get upset at someone like cutting me off on the road
Right.
when I'm in my car is never the way I would get upset if we were like walking on the sidewalk together and they happen to like, I don't know, cut me off by crossing the street. So I just think it does something. It
That's
is
so
like,
interesting. That's a really good analogy. Huh. I'm
this
going to
is where
use
you tell
this.
me you also have road rage so that we can be.
I actually take transit, so my rage is more with the TTC not showing up on time and randomly breaking down 20 times a day. But the beauty of the TTC breaking down is there's 100 other people with you who are as pissed off as you are, and then that's a shared, not a fun experience, but a shared experience nonetheless. In fact, I actually tell a lot of I'm getting to that age where younger people or people early on in their careers ask me for advice, which I think is insane because I'm also in my first year of my career, so I don't get it. And it's usually I tell them like go into the office as much as you can. No one's questioning how productive someone is, whether they're in office or at home. I would make the argument we are more productive when we're working from home.
Mhm.
But those 2 days in office or those 3 days in office will do so much more, especially for people early on in their career, in terms of the visibility that they get. Just like watching someone who's really good at what they do, just sitting next to them and observing them go at it is something that you just can't replicate over Zoom, Slack, or God forbid, Microsoft Teams.
It's okay, we all feel the same about Microsoft Teams.
That is also a universally shared experience. Nobody
Yes.
likes Microsoft Teams. Okay. Since we are on the career piece, what would be your advice to Negin when she was just starting out?
My goodness. Here we go. Another one of those big heavy hitter questions. What would my advice be to my former
If
self?
I had to make small talk, I wouldn't have put the recording on. We could have just kept talking.
I feel you. I appreciate that. I think it would, I mean, this sounds so corny, but it's just it's to trust yourself. You know, I think we have an internal compass. I talk about this a lot in my writing. I do believe that there's an internal compass which aligns us with authenticity, which is not a fluffy thing, right? It's actually what I describe as like the most resonant force in the universe. And that compass can guide you in your life, in your relationships, in the day-to-day activities as much as it can in your career. And so my advice to her, my younger self, would be to really trust yourself and to work on connecting with that inner compass, because that inner compass is the combination of ancestral wisdom, data, your experiences, and the synthesis that your mind is always doing in the background, whether you're aware of it or not. And so it's always being tuned and refined,
Hmm.
and trusting it, and trust in general, to me doesn't mean that we don't mess up or that we don't make the wrong decisions. I
Sure.
think it just means that we know that we are going to make the most authentic decision in that moment, and then be able to respond to the next moment with the same level of authenticity, whether that's good or bad, or what was intended or not. I really feel that we need to trust ourselves a little bit more with our careers.
Amazing. I love that. Talking about RebuildTO again, for someone who's listening and probably lives in Toronto or lives in any other city, and is feeling the same way about this, would it be right to say a sense of decline about the city? How should they get started? Because I know there's a lot of people who feel that way about their respective cities but don't know what to do or where to begin. So we know step one is buying the domain name, but what is how can they get started outside of that?
That's a good question. I would say that my first response to that is that everyone's already empowered to create change. You are born to be a change maker. That's why you're here in this timeline. And those feelings that we're feeling, which I would describe more so as hopelessness than anything else, that's a tool. Hopelessness is a tool for change, just like hope is a tool for change, right? And so I would say, practically speaking, find a few people that feel the same way you do in regards to feeling the sense of something is missing or something needs to change, and the desire to want to create that change, and then come together and dream. Dreaming is a technology. It's available to all of us, and so I think it's really important to come
Love that.
together, specifically to come together to dream about our futures, which are so deeply rooted in the places where we live.
Amazing. I love that. Dreaming as a technology. Watch some tech bro make this a phrase, and not me. I'm not a tech bro. I just work in tech, but I'm not a bro. That's really interesting.
First, you heard it here first.
Yes, we can always go back to this moment and pinpoint down to the minute that you coined this term, and I was there to bask in the glory of that. Wow, dreaming as a technology. That is very
I
good.
have
That
to
is
write
very
an
good.
essay about that. I'm going to put it down as one of my
You should. You
dreams
should.
of technology. Yeah.
Speaking of which, talking about Metaformative, really, really good long form content. One of my favorite essays so far is Excellence, Not Perfection. That one really stuck with me because I sometimes definitely fall into the trap of it's not good enough, shouldn't be out there, should be left through. So I really enjoyed reading it. How do you decide what to write about? Because
Mm.
every topic, like, I sense there's an overarching theme, but at the same time you could read each essay by itself, and there's a wealth of wisdom to be pulled from.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I go through the hero's journey every week when I'm writing, which starts with, oh my God, I don't know what I'm writing about. And then I'll journal and I'll get a bunch of like my observations out. And somewhere in the pages of journaling, a nugget will catch
Hmm.
me. And it'll be like, oh, what? No way. This is what I have to write about this week. And it's like I don't even choose. It's like I'm told, like, this is the thing. This is the thing
Very
to
interesting.
to unravel this week. And it really does feel like an unraveling for me every week. I am learning and growing and processing alongside all of the readers. It's not like I've figured something out. It's I am taking the time to process all of this and share it with you, and I'm learning in the process of doing so. And then sometimes, the idea just comes through because it connects to something that I wrote the week before, or it's maybe a challenging situation that I'm dealing with, or an observation I've made that week where I'm like, whoa, like that's really interesting. Like, am I curious enough to write a 2,000 word essay about that, or is it just like, is that just I'm still going to call it a tweet. Is that just a tweet?
Hmm.
Is it a tweet or is it an essay? And so, and sometimes it starts out with just a single line on, on a post on X, and then it
We
turns in.
still call it Twitter here.
I mean, Elon confused all of us with that. It was so unnecessary. But here we are now, conflicted. But yeah, I think writing is a transformative process. Writing is a tool for thinking. I don't know if you follow or read Paul Graham's essay. He's the founder
I
of Y
do.
Combinator. I'm sure you know, but for those who don't, who might be listening, he wrote a really wonderful essay on the future of writing. And I can't wait to write about it myself because I have a lot of opinions about this. But I think that the scariest part about how much I see folks kind of delegating to AI is that if you tell this thing to do everything for you, it's
Hmm.
basically doing your thinking for you. And now, okay, I get it. It's people are like, yeah, but it's like a calculator. It's like, yeah, you don't really need to do mental math, like unless you're like in a field where you do, but you really need to know how to think for yourself and to synthesize for yourself. And so I would say that one of the reasons why I'm writing every week is to keep my mind moving and to
Mm.
keep myself engaged and be a free thinker and not a dependent thinker.
That's a really good point. I find, like, I do end up using AI tools quite a bit for like day to day tasks, But I did find myself once, I had to draft a proposal which was supposed to be my 2025 vision for my team for next year. And I asked ChatGPT, like I started typing and then I was like, why am I asking ChatGPT to tell me what my vision for 2025 is? I know what the vision is. This is a little concerning. And so I've definitely started leaning more on it. Do you think, like similar to now where we go to the gym for physical exercise because we are not getting enough physical movement in our day-to-day life, there'll be like a thinking gym that we end up spending 30 minutes, 45 minutes a day on just because we will be using AI a lot more in our day-to-day?
Are you sure you're not a futurist? Because that sounds pretty futurist
Does
thinking.
it? Oh, I think a lot. I Yeah, my brain goes 20,000 different places.
I definitely think that there are going to be maybe not like thinking gyms, but a lot more experiences designed to help us maintain or retain or expand our capabilities, our intelligence. And of course, I think it's important to know like there's different types of intelligence and thinking, and the nervous system is highly, highly intelligent. So it's not like, well, if you're not thinking, then you're going to lose your intelligence. No, absolutely not. Your body has its own intelligence. Your spirit has its own intelligence, and it's all interconnected as consciousness. But I think that thinking is important if you want to create, if you want to
Hmm.
build, if you want to make an impact in the world in a way that communicates to other. You need to communicate with other people, and need to
Right.
let people know about your ideas and your visions. And so I think we will have programs and experiences like anything that you're seeing now, I would say, that is moving into the direction of like hyper tech. We're going to see like there's always counterculture that rises to balance that out on the other extreme end. So, I'm one of the co-founders of an organization called Reset, and Reset was really ahead of its time 10 years ago when, we launched a digital detox platform, and it was like no work talk, no technology, no surveillance, and no real names. And you could kind of take on an identity for a weekend, and you were completely unplugged. And we weren't even on our phones and laptops as much then as we are now.
Right.
We were quite a bit, but we were definitely not like all remote working, and when I say all, it's like a lot of people. And Reset was inspired by a camp called Camp Grounded, which like basically this was their vision, was to create a world where there were experiences where you could get away from all of the reality, like the realities that make us less human in a way, right? And to rehumanize ourselves. And so, as someone who was so deeply connected to that vision and like wanted to bring that into the world, I think we're going to see 10,000 more resets in the future. I
Hmm.
think I think that a lot of either current brands and organizations are going to implement some sort of like tech-free day, or like we're going to see that
Right.
because we're going to see the impacts on our mental health, and we're going to see that it's not good.
Yeah. It's also like my friends who are on the dating apps, I see how jaded they have gotten just because of this. Because it's like they're constantly swiping on the screen. You make small talk, and it's the same five questions you have, and then eventually someone somewhere agrees to meet for coffees. Half the dates don't even happen. But then I saw, in funnily enough, it was in New York as well, because there's something special in that city. Is they started doing this offline dating thing where on a wall they start putting up pictures of people, like whoever opted into it, with I think their social media handles, and then you were free to reach out to them. And I don't know what happened after, but it's starting to feel like people are now like it swung too much towards the cell phone, and now people are just trying to win back their time and their dopamine from scrolling endlessly.
Hmm.
Okay, what do you think New York does well that Toronto can learn from?
Thought about this a lot, naturally.
I had a feeling.
Yeah. New York is, in my experience, the most expressed city in the world. It's the full spectrum of human expression. And that has pros and cons, a lot of different types of expression. I'm not saying it's all wonderful. But when I go there, I don't feel like folks are holding back who they are. I think it, for whatever reason, it's given permission to people to be themselves. So maybe it's that there is a frequency of authenticity in New York that is so felt. I always say when I land in New York, my body starts to vibrate because it's like I feel it from the airport. And I think part of it is just that it's a city full of expression, and that expression feels deeply authentic, or at least it does for me. It really resonates. Last time I was in New York, my Uber driver was like, "Oh, do you love New York?" I was like, "I love New York." He's like, "You must have a lot of energy because New York is for people who have a lot of energy." And I think that I've also heard people describe Toronto as a sleepy city. Like it's something sleepy here. It's like, and I don't think that you experience that. There's an aliveness in New York, and I think that aliveness comes from people feeling like they can be themselves and feeling
Right.
expressed. And also, I think there is a shared identity in New York. I don't even know what I would call it. Like I don't know if I have a label or a description of it, but I know that it has a brand. New Yorkers have a brand.
Yeah.
People want to go there because they want to be a part of that, brand. A friend of mine described it as the city of dreams, desires, and delusions. And I was like, that has to be most perfect description of New
Yeah.
York City. And another friend who lives there, actually used to live in Toronto but moved there, said there's something for everyone. No matter who you are,
Hmm.
there's something here just for you that you would deeply enjoy, something that would really resonate. And I think even though we live in the most diversity in the world in Toronto, we don't have that type of dynamic, diverse city experiences where
Right.
there's something for everybody.
Yeah. New York has main character energy, and Toronto doesn't. I feel like Canada in general doesn't really have that. Like the US has major main character energy. I grew up in India, I grew up in Bombay, and Bombay and New York are very similar in the sense they're very high energy. Whatever your ambition level is, you'll find
Mm.
your path there. Both are very good food cities, which even Toronto is. But that's also something growing up in Bombay, which I've noticed in people that grew up in New York, is we tend to have a chip on the shoulder that, yeah, I'm from New York. And yeah, I don't know how we built that in Toronto. I, in general, believe that more people should have main character energy. Most people don't. And my stance on it is if you're not the main character in your own story, then what's even the point?
Mm.
So how can we go about instilling it in a city of 3 million people is a bit of a stretch, but how do we sort of start getting that into the mindset? And again, I go back to that 2019 NBA title. I feel like that was probably the closest we got where people started talking about themselves and about the city in that manner, but then it disappeared again.
I have so many questions back for you.
Oh, okay.
I'm very curious about this main character energy because I think it's been a story that's been fed to us about there's always a main character, right?
Hmm.
In every story. And then there's supporting characters. And the main character goes on a hero's journey. And there's always heroes and villains and ordinary people.
Hmm.
And is that the story that we want to be a part of? Is that the story we want to write into the future? Does there need to be main character energy? What if there wasn't? What would happen if we thought of something different?
Well, what would different look like? When you're going to watch a movie, if there is no main character, is that story appealing enough? Like who do you root for? Who do you love or hate? Either way. If everyone's kind of, you know what I mean? Like what would it look like?
I guess I think about nature when I think about a system
Hmm.
that doesn't have like a main character, where I think about like the interdependency and interconnection of the forest or the oceans, right? Like if
Hmm.
I walk into a forest, I'm not like looking for the main character tree, you know? When you think about the ocean, you're not like, damn, sharks are the main character of the ocean. Like, I mean, it's all very subjective.
I would argue sharks are the main character of the ocean.
I
Have
would
you
say
seen Jaws?
I would say maybe whales, or like, have you seen those? color changing octopus? Like, hello, they're basically aliens. Like, I just think we need to re-examine what it means to shine. Like, there's something I think I think I know what you're kind of saying, where it's like when you have main character energy, you like you own who you are and you like go after what you
Yeah.
want. And I think that main character energy also reminds me of like Trump and Elon, you know, like it's this interesting like this spectrum goes both ways, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe that's why I always come back to authenticity, is that authenticity has nothing to do with being the main character
Hmm.
or not. It has to
Interesting.
do with being the most true version of yourself. And I think that in a city where everybody does that, the city will have inevitably main character energy. Because to me, the best main character energy is that character that's like you fall in love with those characters because they're so deeply themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, I get it. So would it make sense to say like someone has to kick it off for people to start buying into the authenticity piece, and the person whose authenticity lies in being reticent and quiet can't drive that in a city because no one's really picking up on it because they're quiet and reticent, versus someone who is a little bit louder, a little bit more obnoxious, more polarizing for sure. And yeah, the two people you named are probably the most polarizing people on the planet right now. But it gets the conversation started, and eventually it trickles to the point where, like, yes, New York has people that do their own thing quietly and are thriving and living their best lives. But somewhere, and again, this also comes from me. I'm in sales. Like my job requires me to make noise all the time. That is how we get attention and eventually close deals. So that is where I'm approaching it from. Is that we need some people uh, to be not necessarily loud, but vocal enough with an opinion strong enough to move a big number of people and also create some ripples where then that becomes a conversation, because if everyone's agreeing to it, that's not really, that doesn't help either. There has to be
Mhm.
that healthy tension.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you're kind of touching on is that there needs to be expression. Like people need to
Mhm.
express. And it doesn't necessarily need to be loud, but it needs to be impactful.
Right.
And I think it takes a lot of courage to express. And I know I saw this post somewhere a few months ago, but it was like, leaders go first. That's why they're called leaders, And I think that, that resonates with me to some extent,
Hmm.
because I also believe in like lead from behind and lead from the side or lead with.
Right.
But in terms of like taking the risk, yeah, like natural born leaders will be the first to walk into a dark room that feels a little scary because
Right.
they're like, it's okay, I can handle that,
Right.
And so I think that I kind of feel like you're touching on that a little bit, where it's like, well, some people are just going to have to, but I guess this is where when I talk about authenticity, it's like some people are authentically more
Hmm.
loud or rambunctious or whatever.
Right.
But I don't think that we don't need to design always for the loudest person in the room. I think
Good
there's
point.
a lot of power in, as my friend Seema would say, like designing for folks on the margins. Because when you actually design for folks on the margins, you end up including everyone. And not everyone in like, not, I'm not talking about like marketing,
Mm.
like build for everyone, talk to everyone.
Right.
I'm talking about
Right.
like in a city, you do need to create spaces that, connect with folks from different backgrounds. And so I feel that, the expression of New York makes New York special, and
Hmm.
the lack of expression in Toronto is what makes us feel sleepy. And so
Right.
the more we create opportunities for expression, which is why, again, we did those curated gatherings, because if you really think
Right.
about it, we just created space for people to express themselves.
Hmm.
And I think we underestimate how powerful expression is on its own, whether it's the invitation to wear an ugly sweater at a party or it's the invitation to share your story. It's a pretty profound and resonant tool to express yourself.
I love that. Wow. So with RebuildTO, as I said before, like my goal is anything beyond 4 listeners bonus to the show. We get slightly more than that. Um, and if someone's listening and is interested in learning more about RebuildTO or potentially getting more involved, how can they go about doing that?
Email us, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. I think that if there is an inkling within you to do something about some of the challenges that you're personally facing or you see other folks facing or that you see that we collectively have to transmute, I would encourage you to think about if you're the person that can help create that change. And I think we underestimate how much a couple of hours of contribution can go over a period of multiple years or decades. We always talk about at RebuildTO that like ultimately this thing keeps going, the way that it's currently going, we're going to have like hopefully thousands of people that are a part of making it happen. Like not just experiencing what we're doing, but like an initiative or an organization or a movement that's like built by 1,000 hands, that's
Mhm.
like it's not one person's vision, it's not one person's idea, it's you don't know where it starts and ends because so many people have touched it. And so if that resonates with you and you want to be one of those people and you believe in the power of collectives and people coming together, then I would just recommend that you follow that curiosity and reach out and see if there's an opportunity for you to get involved.
Amazing. And in this year and a half of building Rebuild, what has been the most surprising thing that you've noticed?
I guess one of the things, which is kind of funny because I shouldn't be surprised by this, but I guess how many people want to be involved and how much it captures some people just by its name. Like, wait,
Hmm.
what's that? Rebuild TO? Yeah, like I think it either resonates with you or it doesn't. It either resonates with you or it confuses you, or you're like, this is not for me. But when it's for you, it's really fascinating to see the way folks show up on the side of their desks, after work, after, putting the kids to bed. Like we've got folks with kids, we've got folks without, we've got folks who travel for work. Like people deeply care. And I think that's what gives me hope about not just the future for our city, but the world in general is you just need a few people who care a lot to come together and channel that energy into something that can be decentralized in some sort of way and be shared with other people.
Group of people with main character energy. I had to. I had to. I love that. I love that. This was all the questions I had relating to Rebuild TO. Now I have the really hard hitting questions that people find really hard answering.
I'm ready.
What is a subscription you can't live with?
Oh my God. You're gonna make fun of me. Actually, no. You're not gonna make fun of me because I fully, fully believe in this. Probably the Chani app. I love my Chani app. It's an astrology app and
Okay.
dreaming. Astrology, like dreaming, is a technology. And
Hmm.
I don't believe in anything 100%, like anything, but I do feel that it's like this really interesting guiding print, like a guiding framework for my weeks and quarters and years and days and it's also just kind of fun. There's like a fun thing to it. So I would say that,
Nice.
and probably I would be lying if I didn't say ChatGPT is like at this
Yeah.
point.
I know, yeah. And Sora went live today. I haven't been able to log in yet,
I
but I want
saw
to
that.
start tinkering with the video piece as well. No, I would not make fun of you for that. I think that the older I get and I'm just like open to more things and I find that there, I don't know, maybe as I'm getting older, I'm also getting a bit more spiritual.
Mm,
But I'm like, yeah, there has to be more to it than emails and whatever the human world is built. If the universe is infinite, like there shouldn't be a reason for us to be very rigid about anything. So that is good to know. The final question I have for you: what is your go-to hype song whenever you're feeling down?
probably Still Dre by Dr. Dre.
Nice. That is a good one.
What's yours?
That is a very good one. Mine, honestly, it keeps changing depending on what I feel like in the shower that day. I don't have, but I do end up going to 8 Mile a fair bit by Eminem. That tends to be one I end up playing fairly often, but it changes.
Hmm.
Like sometimes it's just the Man of Steel Hans Zimmer score, and that works as well.
Yeah, depends on the week.
Depends on the week for sure. In summer, I don't need a hype song. The sun is my is my hype song. But in the winters, I find myself leaning more and more on hype songs.
I feel that, especially as we approach the shortest day of the year, which is happening in 2 weeks. So we got to brace ourselves and we're going to listen to good music, high
Yeah.
frequency music.
But on the upside, the days will keep getting long after that.
I know. I know. That's like we're crossing the threshold.
We're crossing the threshold. Well, Negin, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot, definitely a lot of good insights for me to take from, and also talk about it very knowledgeably in front of people. And when they ask me, wow, that's very insightful, I'll just be like, yeah, I didn't think of it. Most of the very insightful things I say, funnily enough, have come thanks to this podcast. I hope to see you again in the new year. And thank you. Thank you for tuning in.
You. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the really interesting questions. Definitely a couple of them I didn't really know how to answer. So that's a mark of an interviewer who's done his research. And I really love that you're doing this. I think you're awesome. And I hope that we get to do it again sometime soon.
Thank you, Negin.
Thanks.